Hello, and today I'm welcoming Lynne Peeples, who is a science journalist, science broadcaster, and has written a fantastic book, which we'll be talking about, The Inner Clock. And welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, now you've got an interesting background, one that I would call a slashy. How would you describe your background?
Yeah, it's been a winding road. My first career was in biostatistics. So I was crunching numbers for a lot of clinical trials for the most part.
Mhm.
Did some HIV AIDS research, some
Yeah.
environmental health studies. So I did that for a number of years before realizing that my passion was in writing and talking about the science as opposed to
Mm.
crunching the numbers. So I went back to school for science journalism. And yeah, ever since I've been, yeah, working more with words and thinking about a lot of the same things. So medicine, environmental health, and especially where these things intersect.
Hmm. And I'd imagine with a background in biostatistics, you can tell when the numbers don't add up. I could imagine, there's a lot of that come through, like, hang on.
Yes, exactly. And knowing that there are many ways to present the same numbers to tell different stories. And so yeah, being able to kind of decipher some of that has been valuable for sure.
No, I have heard the saying, torturing the statistics until they confess to what you want them to.
Oh, I like that phrase. I haven't heard that one, but that's
Yeah,
spot on. Yes, yes.
absolutely. So you started off with a science background by statistics, working in clinical, which I also did, clinical research in
Yeah.
HIV/AIDS. That stimulated my career as well. And then you did a journalism degree. What other writing have you done before the book?
Yeah, so my career started in the newsroom of HuffPost, where I was the environmental health reporter. So a lot of my coverage during those years was, everything from toxic chemicals to how climate change is changing the spread of infectious diseases.
Right.
A lot of public health and medicine environment. Again, kind of where those intersected.
Mm.
And it's still an area that I'm very passionate about. I broke away and went freelance a little over a decade ago, and
Right.
since then, my beats have been pretty similar. Maybe a little more medicine overall, but yeah, it's still all these things in there. Where they come together is my passion.
Hmm. Now you've stepped into the area of circadian health, circadian rhythm. What led that? What brought that about?
Yeah, so I really think that goes way back to growing up in Seattle, which is where I now live again. I traveled elsewhere for many years. But the we're at a high latitude and
Yes.
it is notoriously cloudy a lot of the year. So we
Ah,
don't
yes.
see a lot of light. And especially in the wintertime, which thankfully we are coming out of right now, but the days get
Right.
really short. So I knew my from my own experiences, just kind of that whiplash, that seasonal affective disorder was alive and well, quote unquote, for me. And in high school, start times were really early. So there were, many weeks where I'd go to school in the dark and then come home in
Mm.
the dark. And
Mm.
it never, this was all happening behind the scenes. I didn't think about circadian rhythms at the
Mm.
time, but it
It's not a
wasn't
thought you
until
have as a teenager.
not at all. not not the first thing that came to mind. But it was just a few years ago, after having moved back to Seattle, that I had a chance to tour the locker room of our hometown baseball team, the Seattle
Oh,
Mariners. And I
right.
talk about this in the book, but the tour took us into the locker room where they had installed these novel LED lights that
All
they
right.
could adjust in color and in intensity. So they would turn them up, full brightness to bluer hues before the baseball games so the players could be more energized, and then
Mm.
after the games they'd have them dimmer and warmer to help promote sleep so the players could sleep better, get up the next day rested for the next game. And they were describing these in the context of bolstering their circadian rhythms as well. So that was really the first time that I consciously thought about it. And then I
Mm.
began to think, like, could this could this have something to do with my sleep troubles throughout my life? Is this something I could implement and improve my performance, my sleep? And that just sent me down some rabbit holes, to say the least. Yeah.
I'm very familiar with these rabbit holes. Just to rewind to high school, and
Yeah.
I know that American high schools they start quite early. As an Australian, we don't start till after 9 here. I don't think, or they didn't. So
Wow. Yeah.
what time do you start there?
So it's starting to change a little bit, thankfully. But my high school started at, I think it was 7:25. And yeah, I just wrote an op-ed a couple of weeks ago for Time magazine based on the continuing issue here. I visited a high school outside of Seattle that started at 7:20 a.m. But Seattle proper has delayed start times for middle and high schools till 8:30, 8:45. So I mean, there's some places where people are getting the memo and making shifts, but
Seven
it's not widespread.
20. But that's
Yes.
insane. Now, because
Yes.
teenagers are generally not morning people, as you know, the whole
No.
chronobiology.
Right.
Teenagers usually like to be up at the crack of noon, and that,
Yep.
I mean, certainly, unfortunately for me, that has lingered.
Oh, interesting. So you are a true night owl, huh?
I am very much a night owl. I have a very
Yeah.
low MEQ score, and I've got an interview coming up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's fine for me.
Wow. Yeah. I couldn't do that. But I
No, but
guess, yeah.
but high school students are typically
Yeah.
at their most evening, and they're starting high schools at 7:20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really unfortunate. And I think, again, people are talking about it more. Hopefully more districts around the US will start making that change. But yeah, it sounds like you're ahead of the curve. Go Australia.
Well,
Yeah.
I think so. I think I don't know. I've never heard of schools starting at such early times. I'm not sure why yours do, but in Australia, you know,
Mhm.
9:15 is more typical, and it might be different now. But yeah,
Okay. Yeah, that's
so
a little more biologically appropriate.
a
We're
bit more,
definitely
yeah, a bit
biologically
more
backwards.
aligned.
Yes.
Yeah, I've
Yes.
not had that as an adult. I taught an 8 a.m. class at university, but it was optional. You could do it at 8 a.m. or you could do it at 11:30 or you could do it at 3. So I had a handful of very committed students at 8. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe self-selected early birds that
But
decided to come. Yeah.
that's what I thought. So
Yeah.
self-selected it. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, and I understand with the night school because I went on a summer school to Denmark. And of course, summer school in Australia is winter school, Vinterskolen in Denmark. So the sun did not rise until 9:15. And I'm going to school in the dark with the moon shining on me.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, that's rough. That's rough.
Yeah, yeah. So Seattle has very long, dark winters and a lot of cloud as well.
Yes,
And then,
exactly. So getting those photons is tough, right?
yeah. Now, I just like your story with the locker room and the LED lights. Did they do it in reverse in the visitors room? The visitors team.
Ooh, they should. That's right. We could,
That's a
I
bit.
mean, we need,
That's a bit playing dirty.
it is. But we could use
They,
every edge we could get. We haven't made it to the World Series ever.
okay,
So,
you might want to, have a little
yeah,
word with them.
yeah.
They're doing something similar with the new flights that are going to from Australia to London. The Dreamliner flights. They've got the warm, soft light when they want you to sleep, and then the brighter, cool light to wake you up.
That's what I heard. That's great.
Yeah,
And they're doing it
so
at the right times. Or they
doing
do
it
have it. Okay.
absolutely. So
Okay,
because
good.
the jet lag between here and London is horrendous.
How many time zones?
It varies. It's 10 plus or minus one. So at the moment
Okay.
it's 11 because we're on daylight saving.
Right.
Um, in our winter, there's some it'll drop back to 9.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
But yeah,
definitely,
and there's a
definitely
lot of
rough.
time zones between here and the UK.
Yes, right.
So you saw these lights. You saw the light, basically.
I saw the light. Yes, I was enlightened.
You were well done. So you saw these lights that intrigued you in uh, the change was it the locker room,
Yeah, we call them
the
locker
basically
rooms, the changing
right.
room, right?
We
Yeah.
yeah we know what a locker room is.
Okay,
So
good.
sorry, I drifted into Australian then, but yeah, a locker room. So you saw these coloured lights that had an impact, or hopefully had an impact on the
Yes, exactly.
players.
Hmm.
And what did you do after that when once your interest was piqued? Because I imagine there's a lot of steps between that and this.
And that book, yes. So the next step was that I wrote a feature length story for an online magazine in the US,
Hmm.
Undark magazine out of MIT. And yeah, it was focused on circadian lighting specifically. So
Yeah,
that's where I began investigating all these impacts on this third photoreceptor that I know you know about, that we
yeah.
know is giving that intel of the light to the circadian rhythm, or to our circadian system through the master clock.
Mm.
And I did a long story about that, talked to a lot of leading researchers in
Oh
circadian
yes.
science. And then through those conversations, of course, like I heard about all these other aspects of circadian science that touches on society and it touches on our health. And among those was this impact of circadian science on how we practice medicine. So everything from when we take our medicines to when
Mm.
surgeries are conducted, chemotherapy treatments. And then I wrote another feature-length story. This one was for Nature on circadian medicine. And again, there I got to dig even deeper on all this stuff. And it's, as you know, there's so many connections. Circadian
Mm.
science, I mean, circadian rhythms run so many aspects of our physiology.
Yeah.
And there's so many aspects of our society today that is affecting those rhythms. So that's where I saw, you know, more than enough here to write a book about.
Mm.
And then there were a few more things had to fall into place. I got a grant to support producing a proposal, and then that led to getting a book deal to write the book.
Fantastic. So, and I love you talking how interconnected because we've got biology interacting with sociology, interacting with our social contracts. I mean, having high school start at 7:20 a.m. That is insane. Um,
Yeah.
but I like circadian medicine. So we're talking about, and I remember, for example, as a pharmacist, we'd give corticosteroids at about 10 a.m. because that's when it normally peaks. So,
Yeah.
but tell me more about, say, chemotherapy or other circadian medicine, because that's interesting.
Yeah, this is really, you know, still a pretty new area. And it sounds like, you know,
Hmm.
ideas of some aspects of this have been used obviously for decades, and certain drugs that have been prescribed at certain times over the years. But as scientists that I spoke with continue to look and think about all these over-the-counter drugs, or chemotherapies, or even the timing of a surgery, when they think about the timing of these and start studying this, they are seeing that there are certain times of day that a drug can be a lot more effective and potentially have less side effects. So, for
Mm.
example, there was a new drug, or a drug for glioblastoma, that
Oh,
researchers at
yes.
Washington University have been studying and looking at
Yeah.
time of day treatment for that. And they
Right.
found that, like I have actually a note here, I can never remember these numbers, but yeah, they like some retrospective study looking at this found that patients who had taken this drug in the morning survived on average 3.5 months longer than patients who took the same drug later in the day. And that's
Wow.
significant when you think about this drug. This is the same drug that the FDA approved because it extended longevity by 2.5 years, or 2.5 months. Sorry, 2.5 months. So
Yeah.
you're talking 3.5 months versus what it was approved for at 2.5 months. So
That
that's, you know,
is,
pretty substantial.
yeah, that's touching a chord with us because our Australian of the Year has been diagnosed with glioblastoma, and unfortunately his
Oh,
cancer's returned. So
oh, geez.
it's a
Yeah.
headline here, Richard Collier. So very sad.
That is really
Yeah.
sad. And I actually I lost my own mom to glioblastoma.
Oh,
So
oh, that
so that's
is,
a
yeah.
personal note for me as
Hmm.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so I want to talk about your research in the book. And I have to say, I think you make an amazing dinner party guest because I think you've
Why,
got
thank
some
you.
stories to tell. And I'm thinking of a few, but let's start with one. You locked yourself in a bunker in Arkansas. For how long was it?
For 10 nights. So yeah,
10 nights.
just a little
And
over
tell us
10
about
days. Yeah.
a
Mhm.
little over 10 days. And tell us about the setup.
Yes. So I was trying to find a place where I could really cut myself off from all the cues that we know help tell our circadian clocks the time of day, the
Mm,
time on the earthly day
right.
on our revolving planet. And so, that's primarily light, as we know. So
Yeah.
I didn't want any access to daylight, and then obviously no access to a clock or any other
Right.
humans. So I
So,
found this former Cold War era nuclear missile silo in Arkansas that a
right.
man had purchased from the government, souped it up into this pretty luxurious Airbnb. And
As you
so,
do.
as you do. So it's funny because when I tell people this, they think I was, living in this dark dungeon. And I mean, it was dark, but it wasn't a dungeon.
It,
So
it was quite
we
nice,
it was quite nice, quite a lovely,
but
very
very dark.
comfortable bed. Yes, very dark. And by dark, so he had an LED lighting system in there that
Yeah.
you could adjust. So we adjusted it to a dim red light throughout.
Yeah.
We
Because
know
that's
red
got the
light.
least impact. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So that was my environment. And then I decked myself out with a whole bunch of devices that were measuring different things that reflect different rhythms in my body.
Hmm.
So heart rate and temperature.
Right.
And of course, I was tracking my sleep and my blood glucose levels. So I was, so wearing all these devices that I had my phone and stuff in there that I used to help get the data to the cloud, but I wasn't
Yeah.
using them. And then
And
I
you
just,
couldn't actually see the time. You had to cover the clock on your
I
computer.
literally had black tape on everything. So black tape on my
Right.
devices, black tape on the microwave, on the oven.
Right.
It
And
was.
of course, any devices that shed, green light or blue light, something that's not red, you'd have to cover up.
Yep, yep, exactly. It was
And
quite the endeavor to get this place safe for the experiment.
uh, and one thing you said you lost color because you only had dim red light, so you didn't have greens or blues or anything apart from dim red.
Yeah, it was sort of. I hadn't thought about that right when going into this,
That
but yeah, I was
aspect.
making baking blueberry pancakes one night, and the blueberries were not blue; they were
No.
gray, black. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And one thing that stood out to me in that experiment was that you had multiple clocks. You said that you had, one clock for your temperature, another clock for your heart rate. They all went out of sync. Describe to me
Yes.
how that was.
Right. So later, after I got back, I worked with some scientists here in the US to analyze the data that my devices had collected. And so we looked at the pattern of my heart rate, the pattern of my temperature, all these things. And we saw that, at the beginning of the experiment, day one,
They're
you know,
all in
these
sync.
they were, not necessarily, directly in sync, but they were coordinated, right? Like one
Yeah,
might have been high while the others low, but right, they were it's in sync, sure.
yeah.
And then about day 5, 6, 7, they just started falling out of coordination with each other, and they were also dampened. So those highs and
Wow.
lows were,
The,
were
the
were
amplitude
closer.
was lost.
The amplitude was lost. And
Wow.
that was about the same time because I was making notes throughout the experiment on a voice
Mm.
recorder with timestamps. And that's when I started to feel all those jet lag symptoms, the
Right.
messed up stomach, the kind of foggy brain,
Yeah.
lack of coordination, just all those things that we
Yeah.
we do not enjoy when we travel internationally. My body,
No jet lag. Well,
yes, you do. So my body was manifesting broken
jet lag.
clocks, jet
Yeah.
lag.
The clocks. And when you came out, and I imagine it would have taken a bit for your eyes to adjust. How long did it take for your clocks to get back into sync?
Yeah, so I was also, I traveled back to Seattle from Arkansas. I would say it was about a week, I think, before I
Yeah.
was really feeling fully back in sync with, the day and night here in Seattle. I tried to do I learned at that point the things to do to try to pull yourself back in sync faster. So I was checking all those boxes, getting my morning light and consolidating
Yeah.
my meals and all those things. So but yeah, it took a little time.
Mm. Excellent. So it really took, but that experiment was useful for, I mean, it's great, reading for the book, but it really illustrated, and I think something that I learned, one of the things that I learned from the book is that there's multiple circadian, because I think of the circadian rhythm, but you've got multiple.
Yes, exactly. That is one thing I learned, and it's fascinating to think that just about every cell in your body has a clock. So that means we have trillions of
Mm.
clocks. And it's not just, yeah. So when we say circadian rhythm, it's sort of a misnomer. We really have,
Mm.
countless rhythms in
Rhythms.
our body. But they are,
Yeah.
if we're in sync with the sun, if we're keeping our rhythms healthy, then they should be in sync. And it's, you can think of it as one, full circadian system doing is an orchestra conducting all
Yeah.
these various rhythms in the body in a smart way that helps our physiology to do all those to do the right things at the right times based on the
Yeah.
earthly day. So yeah, your as your digestive system has a rhythm, your brain, your immune system, all these things are being driven by our the clock, our inner clocks.
Now, these clocks, of course, aren't restricted to humans. You were in a sunflower field, I believe, and when sunflowers are still buds, they also move across
Oh,
with
this
the
is
sun.
so
Is that?
fascinating. I hadn't so apparently a lot of people had heard about this. I hadn't, but there's a phrase that people say about sunflowers following the
Mm.
sun. And as I learned, that is a bit of a misnomer. But anyway, I camped in a sunflower field to, see this for myself. But I camped out overnight and I watched as these young sunflowers, so they're buds, they
Mm.
weren't flowers quite yet. They
Yeah.
would keep their buds pointed to the sun. So I got there, it was late afternoon, evening. I saw them kind of moving towards where the sun was setting. And then after the sunset and it got dark, I watched how they started to straighten back up in the middle of the night. They're essentially pointed at the sky. And
Wow.
then before the sun rose, they were facing west,
Wow.
or sorry, east. Sunrise is in the east. Yes, they were facing
Yes.
east before the sun rose, anticipating that sunrise. So that
Wow.
is an illustration of, yeah, again, all life, just about all life that we've looked for a rhythm, we found it, and it's because it has this survival advantage. Because the
Yeah.
sunflower could anticipate the sunrise and be there ready and waiting for it, it's going to get all the benefits of it, optimizing all the benefits. So it's going to warm its head faster, which is going to help a whole host of other physiological things, including,
Mm.
attracting pollinators and such.
Right. And that's only the buds. It's not the once the flowers open.
Yeah. So at the point at which it's fully developed, the stem stiffens and
Yeah.
locks the head in place. Right.
Right. Okay. Because it yeah. Okay. So
It
that's
wouldn't be able to
fascinating.
handle doing that. Yeah.
So and was it comfortable in a sunflower seed field? There was a maze, I think there was.
Yes. So when I was going around and I was tracking the movement, I set my alarm in the middle of the night to go, take a look.
Check on the
And
sunflowers.
I got to check on the sunflower. So I had my red light and I was going wandering through a sunflower maze in the middle of the night. I yeah, totally normal. Just like going into a bunker in Arkansas, I guess.
Well, I just love the fact that you really immerse yourself in your experiments. And you had a trip to Alaska, and thankfully it was their summer,
Yes.
so the days were very long. Tell us about traveling to Alaska.
Yeah, I had to make up for all the light I lost in the bunker. So I went to
Well
Alaska
played.
in June during what they call the midnight sun.
Yes.
So I yeah, camping out there for 4 days, and yeah, the sun would set barely, but it never got dark. So the sky was always aglow, and sleep was very difficult.
That's because it's always sunny.
Yes.
And did it get
Yeah.
cloudy or was it like blue skies and
It
sunshine?
was blue skies, a little haze
Mm.
because there were some wildfires nearby, but yeah,
Okay.
it was bright, sunny days, warm. And yeah, it was an illustration for me of all the impacts of light. So we've got, my circadian rhythms were once again confused. It's like, what's going on
Yeah.
here? When is night coming?
Yeah.
And then you also have the direct energizing effect of light. So despite the
Right.
fact that I couldn't get a lot of sleep, I was still, it was, kind of that manic
Mm.
feeling. You're getting energized, you're sleep deprived. And it's
Yeah.
funny because I was there with a bunch of people who lived in Alaska. This is, what they experience
Yeah.
every year. And they said it's very much this manic depressive sort of uh,
Seasonal.
whiplash seasonal thing that they go through every year in the summer. But yeah, they're just making
It,
up for
it's
lost time in a manic way.
it's interesting you say that because I know bipolar disorder is linked to the circadian rhythm, and they've done research where people fly across time zones and experience acute episodes. So there's there may be some link there. That manic depressive, that bipolar may not be far off the mark. It actually might be a bit close to
No,
it.
yeah, absolutely. Now there definitely are circadian links to that. I had not heard about the experiments with the time zones. That's interesting, but yeah, for sure. And they're thinking about, yeah, being able to address circadian rhythms as potentially a way to mitigate symptoms of bipolar or lessen.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and you had almost 24 hours of sun, and your body's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, let's party because no night yet. When you got back to Seattle again, how long did it take to settle back into your circadian rhythm?
Yeah, it wasn't quite as bad, but also partly because there weren't as many time zones involved. But but within a few days, I was back on track.
Right.
But still, it takes a little time. It's also hard to tell because it's the rhythms can kind of get back in sync, but do they
Mm.
have that amplitude again? So that's a little
Yeah,
harder to pinpoint. I wasn't able to use all the devices that I had in the bunker to measure these things, but I was
yeah.
feeling pretty good within a week or so.
Oh, good. Yeah, which is
Yeah.
fairly common for jet lag. In a week
Right.
later you recover. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, I just want to mention your book to our reader. I have actually done a well, my filter's not playing nice with it, but you've got it behind a copy behind your head, The Inner Clock,
Yep. That's the
and
US cover.
I have done a book review on that with Arthur Chan, and I've given it a 5-star recommendation. So you've done well.
You.
I think that one is just that review's just come out. So certainly you can get this. I picked this up at Big W, so you don't even need to use the big book retailers anymore. But The Inner Clock by Lynne Peeples, and it's a good read. It's you got a solid understanding of the science because there's an awful lot of woo woo in circadian rhythm, and I'm sure you bumped up against some of it,
Right. Right. Right.
but solidly based in science, and it's a good read. Lots of anecdotes as well, which I really enjoyed. So I reckon, thank you very much for joining me today,
Oh, thank you for
and
having me.
welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.